Hello and welcome to the Zwift Race Place. I'm Cade Fravel, and today we're bringing you a course recon ride of the Tour of Tewitt. Well, that's this week's ZRL course. Today on the mic with me, giving our elite advice, is Adam Thorpe and Hal Davis. Adam, you want to introduce yourself, and then Hal, you can go ahead.
Hi guys, I'm one of the men's Premier League team from Wahoo Le Col, and this is exciting opportunity to talk about what is going to be a very, very tough course this week. So, I'm looking forward to having a chat about tactics on this.
All right, Hal, you're up.
Hi guys, Hal Davis. I'm Premier League team. Probably racing on Monday as the fourth. I'll end up racing all the Premier League races, but had a few issues with Wi-Fi over the last two, so this is a good course for me. I've raced it about 10 times in the last 4 weeks, so kind of know my way around it, where to attack, where to hold on. So this will be good fun.
Okay, perfect. Now we have the elevation profile pulled up on the stream right now. For those of you who are watching it currently, and for those of you who are listening, we have pretty much 3 climbs on this course. Kind of 4 if you consider there's a last hump over to the downhill into the finish. But only the first one is a actual intermediate segment, which counts for points. So that first one that you can see here, it's highlighted in red, is the Yorkshire KOM reverse. That's going to come pretty soon after the finish, and that is the only climb this week that counts for points on the course. I wanted to talk first about whether or not you guys think a break could possibly get away on this course, just looking at the course as a whole. Hal, you want to start us off?
Yeah, it's an interesting climb, this one. It's a 2-minute climb for the fastest guys, give or take 10 seconds. And it's not steep at any point, so draftable all the way. Steepest bit is at the bottom, but you've got the momentum to start you off. So what this climb will be is a case of riding hard enough to stay in the group, and then when you see the banner come into view on your map, probably a sprint finish for the KOM points. But even if a break goes up here, you've then got a 90-second descent the other side, and a big group will chase and catch back up. So no, I don't think a break will split here at all. I think a few people will drop off if the pace is really hot. But yeah, it will come down to a final kick to the finish.
Okay, Adam, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think this first climb is going to be obviously it's going to be the most interesting point on this course in terms of how the pace is going to be, because I think particularly on lap 1, you might see a big difference between your community league races and your Premier League races, because if you've got maybe a good sprinter, I think potentially a good opportunity for you, because it's immediately into the race. It's not about, you don't have to get over 3 or 4 climbs, score some points. You could sort of sit in the group and try and gain maximum points on the lap 1 sprint, and sort of fade away and have that almost be your race, because in the community divisions, the fastest through segment as well, it changes the point scoring quite dramatically. But in the Premier League, I think it'll be a lot less likely to see a proper break get away. But in that respect, in the community leagues, that means you're going to have a lot of people who are aiming to focus on the finish line, and you're going to have a lot of people who are focusing on the first climb as their all-out max effort, potentially. So you've got the riders focusing on the finish, having to tread a very fine line between going too deep on the first climb to stick with the people who are going max effort, and pacing themselves to get through what's potentially an hour-long effort. So I think it will be a hard job for those behind, particularly.
I think that's interesting what you mentioned about differences between the Premier League and the Community League, because I think that is something that ends up being different a lot of the time. The level of racers in the Premier League is obviously a bit higher, and sometimes sometimes it makes it more interesting, and sometimes it makes it less interesting, as everybody's kind of using the top tactics so we don't see as many things like breaks. I'd have to agree with you guys. I don't think that we're gonna see a break in the Premier League, but I would say that I think it's a possibility in some of the lower level community divisions, like the C's and D's. Another thing that I did want to mention is that A's and B's will be doing 4 laps of this course, and C's and D's will be doing only 3. So that's another difference. That's something we've seen quite a lot over the past few weeks, is differences in distances. This brings me to my second point, kind of, which was for the better climbers in here. Would it be more beneficial for them to kind of just hang in over that first KOM and just kind of sit in rather than going for it to kind of conserve energy so they could maybe get some first across the line later on in the race? Or do you need to be going for the win on that KOM every single time to really get max points? Adam, you want to start maybe?
Yeah, I think that's certainly going to depend on what you're racing, whether it's community or Premier League. Premier League only has 5 points, I believe, on offer at the top of the prime, which is not a lot for a lot of max effort. But it depends what kind of climber you are as well. If you're someone suited to sort of 20, 30-minute efforts, going really deep on lap 1 might not be the most sensible option, considering you could be up against people who are really punchy 1 to 2 minute riders who that climb is really going to suit. And whereas you could gain a lot of points by getting in top 10, because I think it's likely that the group will thin out to sort of 10 riders by a couple of laps in. And those 10 riders up every single first across the line point on that climb. So I think you need to be aware of what your strengths are on this course, tailor your pacing strategy to that. So yeah, if you're good at FTP stuff, focusing on potentially getting in that front group that does split eventually rather than going too deep too early. I think that would be my strategy, is really just tailor it to your own strength.
All right. Hywell, do you have anything to add about kind of playing to your strengths and how you would approach this if you were a climber?
I don't think this is a climber's course, to be honest. The reason I say that is because a good climber is someone who's up at 5.5, 6 watts a kilo, who can hold that for 10, 15 minutes. But this course is all about your 1 minute effort, because you've got to go well above that 6 watts a kilo to keep in the group on 2 or 3 occasions here. And the climbs are very short. So if you're a good climber, you really want to be doing the least amount you can. Stay in the group on the false flats and flat bits, sit in the group, but try and get to the front of the group then before the climbs start. So at least if you're on your limit, you've got all of the group to help you draft and stay in. Because I think most of the course, the group is going to have a long tail, and it will then come back together, apart from when we do get to the steep climb coming up. Because if you split there, I think you're pretty much out of the race.
I think that's a really good point as well, actually, in terms of how you approach climbs. I think if you know you're going to be struggling on a climb, finding a way to create wiggle room for yourself so that you can slip back through the group. So if you can start at the front climb and then sort of give yourself an extra 20 yards or so to drop back through the pack, still be in contact without getting dropped at the top of the climb. It's worth really working out how you can do that to really make sure that you have an easier ride on the climb, particularly on the ones where the prime points aren't relevant.
All right, so I think that's all really good advice, and I think it's good that riders are currently previewing this as well and riding it so they can kind of figure out what each of these climbs is going to take. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about, Hywell, you mentioned that you don't think that this really is a climber's course, and so I wanted to kind of pivot and talk about what a sprinter could maybe do on this course and how a sprinter would look at this course. You mentioned that many of the climbs are going to be short, although this first one is the only one where you can really grab points. So do you think that sprinters should be focusing more on grabbing points on this first climb, especially on that first lap, before some of the better climbers who are a little lighter have a chance to try and drop them on later climbs? Or should they be trying to stay in and focus on the finish? Hywell, you want to start us off this time?
Yeah, I think putting all your eggs in one basket is a bad thing to do here. So if you've got a really good sprinter on your team who you know is going to struggle on the hills, it's worth going for that first one flat out. But there's so much of this course is a case of a hard effort and then an easier effort, and the group comes back together. So if you're a sprinter and you've got a very low 20 watt per kilo, 5 minutes watt per kilo compared to your sprint, you've really just got to focus on the 1 30-second effort when you get to the top bank wall. And if you can get up there and stay in contention, then you've got a chance. But it really is a case of get yourself up that hill and then you're in contention with the rest of the group. But if you can't get up it, the group's just going to ride away. And straight after that hill coming up, the course just takes ages to flatten out. So you've got another 30 seconds or so where you've just got to draft off other riders, wait for it to start going downhill, and hopefully then get a bit of a break.
All right, Adam, do you have anything to add on to that, just about handling this course as a sprinter and maybe how your team should be supporting you?
I think it's I was pointing about what your 5 watt per kilo is really key, actually, because I think that'll be what potentially defines whether you can get round this course, because there will be a very big difference between getting to the finish or getting 2 laps in. If you can get 2 laps in, got 2 shots of getting prime points. But unless you know you're pretty confident, you've got a good shot of making it to the finish, I think you do need to really leave it all out there on the 2 prime points before that, because they're where you're going to make your biggest impact for the team. So I think if I was a sprinter who was very, very worried about getting dropped from the course, I would be really hitting those intermediate sprints hard, and then just doing the minimum possible to try and stay in the group, and hitting the pop bank wall particularly hard as well, because you're going to see, I think, half the field drop away in a lot of divisions on that climb on lap 1. So knowing what your abilities are and whether you're actually going to be able to over a lap or so in the front pack is going to be key, I think. But if you're worried, I'd get points on the board early, is my suggestion.
There's a part of the course where we're just at the top of the hill now, and there's a gate and a tractor, and we're still at 8%. After that tractor, it just starts to level out a little bit. And that's where you need to have one more big effort to get back into the group. So if you can get to that point, so call it about 40 seconds from the bottom, and then get to the tractor and think, one more push to stay in the group, you've got another sort of 10, 15 seconds to hang on. If you can do that, you've made it. And if you drop off at that tractor, then the group starts going away. You won't get back on.
I think that's really interesting, because when I'm racing in any race, real life or on Zwift, I think landmarks are a great thing to keep in mind. Just things that you see on the side of the course or in the course that kind of give you a reminder as to how far is left to the top of the climb, to the finish, to whatever feature you're watching out for on course. I want to go back to what Adam was saying, and Hywell, I believe you were saying this earlier, which is that a lot of this course is just going to be about knowing your strengths. And I think it might even be worth it to just kind of take a look at your Zwift Power profile, look at where your strongest areas are, and try and consider that before you're going into your race. I think I wanted to take a break from some of the heavier stuff real quick and do something that we seem to do pretty much every stream, which is kind of the power-up talk. And it's always interesting to see what opinions our elite riders have on the power-ups. So I believe power-ups this week are going to be Anvil, Draft, and Feather. Adam, maybe you want to start. What are your opinions on the power-ups for this week? Good choices, bad choices?
Probably very good choices in terms of spicing up the race. I think the Anvil is going to play an part this week's course. Zwift Insider today post recently suggested how much it actually increased your weight by, and it actually 50 kilos, which I don't think a lot of people realise. So if you drop it in the wrong point, that's race over pretty much. But if you use it in the right way, I think that is going to be absolutely lethal on this course. Especially if you can maybe coordinate as a team to use that.
Can you say again how many kilos it adds to your weight?
It's 50 kilos, 50.
That's a pretty considerable amount. That's more than double what I weigh alone. So, Hywell, what are your thoughts on power-ups for this week?
There's one that I'll save. If I race a race with power-ups, if I get an aero, I save it. And it doesn't matter what race it is, and I always save it to the end, so I don't use them. But on this course, the feather is going to be the major difference. And I think on the choice of power-ups for this one means that the only one you use for the finish is probably the draft. But if you get a feather, you've got to keep it for pot bank wall every lap and use it there. And that means you won't get anything going into the finish. But if you get an anvil, then the best place for the anvil is going to be coming up on the home run into the finish. So when you've got the long 2K downhill and you can super tuck, use the anvil and move through groups, and it will just give you a really good rest before the finish, because that's the easiest part of this course. You don't have to do a lot, and even if someone attacks, a group will chase back on. So maybe a group of people with an anvil in a small breakaway group will be significant, but for me, this race is all about the feather and hitting the bottom of the steep bit, hit the feather, and that'll at least keep you in contention.
Yeah, I think Hyrule was absolutely spot on. The pot bank is all about having the feather, I think, because if you don't, it's going to be a lot harder for you and those around you as well. But I also think there is merit to having all three power-ups finished. Like Hal's just said about the anvil at the end, that could be really handy to do a rest or a sprint. And the draft is obviously going to be probably the only one that actually makes a real difference to your sprinting ability in terms of if you time it right and come through the group, it will help in that respect. So none of them are bad options, but the key is having the lightweight for pot bank flap. That is absolutely the key here.
All right, so it seems like, kind of in summary, feather's going to be the most important on this course for all those climbs. But if you have anvil, the top of the descent towards the finish is a good place to drop that, and draft could also be used in the finish. We just came over a little kind of lump here in the course before we start to descend down into the finish. It gets up to, I believe, 9% gradient, which is pretty steep. Do either of you think that we could see any last-minute splits in the pack before the finish there? If we're looking at the last lap, kind of coming over that little lump. Adam, maybe you want to start?
I think it's possible, but it's going to depend on pack size. And that's going to be one of the biggest differences. Like I say, in the Premier League, you're probably going to see still quite a few in that front pack. So the bunch chase way too fast on the descent that I think a solo rider going away is very unlikely. But if you're in a community division where there's maybe 4 in your group at that point, if you've still got okay legs, you don't have the best sprint, I think there's every reason to maybe try something on the final hill, because if you know you're not winning that sprint, there's no point waiting. So you might as well try something. But it's going to be a very, very attritional race, this, I think, and it's going to be about how well you can cover climbs and then how much you've got left for the finish. It's not going to be everyone's 15 seconds max power to course. It's going to be a severely dented sprint finish. So I certainly think there's a good opportunity to go if you're in a small group.
I think that's interesting, and I think that's important too, because a lot of the time I think people are afraid to make attacks like that, especially if you're in a group of 4 and you know that the 3 other people with you are faster sprinters than you. It's sometimes just worth it to go for it, especially if there's enough of a gap between your group and the group behind, as it often is in the community division, where you don't think there's little chance of you getting caught before the finish. Most of the time it can't hurt to make that attack, because the worst you're going to get is 4th, which is what you'd most likely get in the sprint anyway. Hywell, do you have anything to add on to that before we move on to talking about the finish here? Because we're just coming down through the banner right now.
No, that's all good. It's all good. Do you want to give anything else away?
All right. So, talking about the finish a little now. Obviously, it's downhill to the finish. We mentioned Anvil and Draft might be interesting to have. Well, Anvil for the top of that descent there, and Draft for kind of in the middle of the sprint. I think we've talked about this on these streams before, but do you guys have any advice for downhill sprints, just kind of in general? This is kind of a broad question, but just any sort of advice you might want to give. Hywell, you want to start this time?
Yeah, it's a good sprint, this one, because you come in from a long way out, and that final bend creeps up on your mini map, so you can see when it's coming. And that final bend is the 300 meter to go mark. So when most people start the sprint, but the descent on this, because it's so fast and you're in a group, you can play around with the group a little bit and like sprint off the front, and then everyone's got to chase and overtake you, and it lifts the speed of the group up. So then you don't have to do as much work, and you can just sit in, ride that draft, and then when it's time to launch, you've got a lot more speed. So you've really just got to play the drafting game well. Hang at the back of the group, but build up speed, move through the group, and when you're moving, then go all in that last 300.
I think, not leading it out as well is the key, particularly on downhill, because as soon as someone's in your draft, that's your chances over. So it's going to be like Flatland Loop a little bit in that respect, where you need to really study that finish and work out how late you can get to the front, because the later you get to the front, the more likely you are going to win. Again, it's going to depend on the pack size. I think in group 4, it's still going to be all about not leading it out, but there's more opportunities to go long for a group than there is in a big group, because in a big group you just want to sit in and try and really come past with a lot of speed in the last few seconds, whether you need a run up into the group to sort of build your momentum. That's a potential tactic to use as well.
All right, I think that's really valuable to consider, that you're going to want to try and hit the front as late as possible in the sprint, because if you get on the front, you're just dragging people along with you in the draft. And I think that's something that people should really be keeping in mind when they're coming into that sprint. I think one of the most interesting categories to watch, and I'm a little biased here as a C myself, but might be the C category, because I know that the sprints in the C's are always quite interesting, because it's a lot of riders who are really good sprinters in the C race, and a lot of the time riders who they weigh a little more than B's, A's, or Premier Division riders. So that'll be a really fast finish in the C race, and I think that could be an interesting finish to watch. I'll be keeping my eyes open for that. All right. Well, I think that pretty much sums up everything that we had to talk about today. We've been through about one lap on the course. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Cy Bradley in chat. If you want more info on this course, check out his video about this over on YouTube. Let's see, just looking in chat real quick. Jamie Watson said this looks like a good course and should have some good, interesting sections to split the groups. I think splits in the group are going to be key this week, as we've kind of talked about here. I don't think we're going to be seeing a finish as a bunch necessarily, or probably definitely not in most categories. So if anybody else has any other questions, now is the time to leave them in the chat. Adam or Hywell, do you guys have any last words to add before we finish up?
Yeah, I
Maybe
guess.
bike choice. Sorry. Yeah, go on, Hal.
Yeah, so I'm mid chase at the moment. The key with this race is to see it as 4 parts. Break it down. The first bit is going to be hard, and then you do have a little bit of recovery. Yes, there's another little climb after the bottom of the KOM, but nothing will happen there too much. So you've got about 3 minutes recovery, and then hit the pot bank wall. But that's the start of a big effort then to get all the way towards the top of the Harrogate descent then into the finish. So you have got 2 hard sections, but 2 recovery sections. So focus on get to the recovery, and that's where you need to drink, soft pedal, just breathe and reset and refocus and just get motivated for the next effort, because this is just going to be lots and lots of short all-out efforts rather than anything too sustained.
Yeah, I think the key, like Hal said, is got to look at this course and try and spot where you're going to get your recovery, and pair the way you race in order to make sure that you are getting recovery. So if you are off the back climb, you're going to be chasing on when everyone else is recovering. And that's just going to mean the next time you get to a climb, the exact same thing happens. You're knackered, you're getting dropped to a climb, and you're chasing back on again, and it's like spiral, and you do eventually get dropped. So you need to make sure you are pack over the top of the climb, and then you do target your recovery as real key. And that's what's going to make this race very interesting. And I've said this a lot about how groups be in the community divisions, particularly. There's going to be a lot of people soft pedaling for a lot of this course, groups, and the group is maybe with less than 10 riders. I think if you're a really, really strong TP rider, there is feasibly an opportunity to go away on your own, which there probably wasn't on any other courses. It's going to depend on the speed within the division, because obviously certain faster divisions the draft makes a bigger difference. But I do think there is a potential opportunity to go solo or in a very break with someone else, where you're not pedaling all the flats and you're pushing on the flats and resting on the descents only, because big gaps can be made there, I think.
Yeah, it's a perfect course for people to look at each other and say, I'm not chasing because I'm going to save myself for the climb. And that's when someone can get away.
All right, well, I think this one's going to be really interesting, with splits in the pack and possible breaks, as we've talked about here and you guys were just mentioning. Before we finish up, I think, Adam, you had mentioned this, and somebody in chat had just said, Mark Smith said, did I miss the bit about bike choice? So I forgot about that. We have to touch on bike choice real quick before we finish up here. Do you guys have any advice on bike choice before I tell you what the fastest frames and wheel sets are? I pulled up Zwift Insider, so I've got some of our fastest data here. But what would your guesses be? Adam first, and then Hywell.
This is a really tough one. I think depends what your focuses are within the race. If you're a sprinter, going for only the lap 1 prime, you probably just want something fast and aero, so draftable. But if you're looking at the long game, pop bank is probably where you're going to get dropped. So having something really light to get up that is probably well worth it, because you only really need the aero for sprint, for chasing back on if you're on your own. Because I suspect a lot of people will go with a very lightweight option. So maybe an all-round option is good for this week, but I think it's really you'll see a lot of different choices potentially this week. But it'll be interesting to see what Hal thinks.
All right, Hybel, your guess before we read them off.
Yeah, if I had an open choice and I was doing the Premier League race, I'd go for the Cervelo and the disc, the DT Swiss disc. But I can't do that, so I'm probably going to go with the DT Swiss thousands. And if I was doing a community race where there's more chance of a split rather than the strength and depth of the Premier League, I would go for that bike and use the DT Swiss, because I think the pace of the climb in smaller groups means you're better off with a lightweight bike, whereas you can get away with a disc in a big group. So I'm going to go probably veering on the side of lighter weight, just really because of the dynamics of the course and the bigger group and the fact that we can't use discs.
All right, well, these are all really interesting points, and anybody listening should keep these in mind. But for the official fastest frames and wheel sets on this course, I'm going to the Zwift Insider page on this about week 6 of the ZRL. That's this week, so you guys should check that out if you're looking for any more information. But according to Zwift Insider, Tron is going to be fastest. I don't know if you guys are allowed to use that in the Premier Division?
No, unfortunately not.
And then Specialized Athos with the lightweight Milensteins are going to be the second fastest. Then Cervelo S5 2020 with the DT Swiss disc. Hywell, you mentioned the disc, so that was a good choice. Then the Scott Addict RC with the NV 7.8s. And finally, Canyon Air Road 2021 with DT Swiss ARC 62s. And I should mention, it's only 1.1 seconds different between all of those frames.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
there's clearly advantage to every possible thing, and it's going to depend on how your race unfolds, I think. So have a think about how your division has been playing out previously, whether you're going to be on your own or in a very small group, or if you're likely to be in a big group. I think that's what you need to think about, because there's lots of good options on this course.
I would agree. Cy Bradley just mentioned in chat he doesn't think that the overall fastest frames, according to Zwift Insider, are necessarily the best choice. And I think that's kind of what we've touched on here with your guesses and the fact that there's a lot of different aspects to take into account. All right, last call for any questions in the chat. I think that just about sums it up for this week's stream. We hung around a little longer than I was expecting, but I think that we got a lot of good information in here. So, just looking in the chat, I don't think that we have anything else. You guys want to say goodbye real quick? Hywell, you want to start?
Yeah, good luck for the race, guys, but just remember, if you get dropped on the first climb, keep going. It's still a good workout.
All right, last words, Adam?
Yeah, thank you very much for today, Cade. It's been a pleasure to talk through tactics again, and still learning a bit from all the discussions we have, because there's so many good options on how to play this course. And I think it's going to be a really exciting set of races this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes.
All right. So I want to say thank you to all of WLC for this ride. Special thanks to Hywell and Adam for their amazing advice this week. Thanks to all of our listeners. I hope you got a lot out of this, and we will see you